So thank you very much. I think we're on time to start the next session, which is on a Green New Deal for the world. And my name is Dimitrios Papathanasiou. I'll be moderating the panel in this discussion. I am the Global Director for Energy and Extractives for the World Bank. And it's a pleasure. We have with us Minister Claver Gatete, the Minister of Infrastructure with the Government of Rwanda. We have Dolf Gillen, the Director for Innovation and Technology for IRENA, Ms. Laura Cocci from the International Energy Agency, Mr. Will Cavendish, a Director with ARUP, and Mr. Jude More, who's a Senior Policy Fellow in the Center for Global Development and also an ex-minister himself. So what we'll be discussing in this session is that there is increasingly among thinkers and academia, and now lately we have heard it almost loud and clear from our colleagues at the fund and others, that we should be working towards a greener world, that investments in greener infrastructure make a lot of sense and they have significant benefits. And we would like to do a check of how these ideas and the thinking on investing on cleaner infrastructure, how this actually translate on the ground with the experience that particular governments have, especially in the developing world. We would like to see how the thinking goes in some countries of the developed world. And we have our colleagues from IEA and IRENA who can help us with their modeling and insights on how we can all move towards a greener kind of infrastructure. So the way we will run this panel is we will start with a few minutes of remarks by each one of our panel members. So we will start with Minister Gatete, then we'll go to Jude Moore, then we'll have Laura Cocci, Will Cavendish, and at the end of the series of panelists, Dolf Gillen will conclude with the perspectives from IRENA. Now, I would like to move on to our next panelist, and it's a particular pleasure to introduce Will Cavendish, who's now leads ARUP's Global Digital Services. Will is an old friend and is a man that has had a very remarkable trajectory. I mean, he has been in the World Bank. He went to academia, both at Oxford and Imperial College, where I had the pleasure to meet him and be taught by him. And then he did important work on climate change with the UK government. He did important work with the health department in the UK government. And then he did very cool things on artificial intelligence. And now he's working on digital services. So Will, if I can ask you to look a little bit both on your government experience in terms of developing policies with a greening on infrastructure, and also what you see things now happening from the private sector and the challenges and opportunities we have with the digital transformation that the world feels and that we all taking benefit of just to have this event right now. Over to you, Will.
So, Dimitrios, thank you so much for that introduction. I feel like more like I've stumbled through life than there's ever been a clear plan, but it's very kind of you to say that. So, I think if we look at the world and we look at the world here and in the future, we know that to meet people's needs over the next few decades, we're going to need massive provision of new infrastructure, and we're going to need to massively retrofit our infrastructure and buildings if we're going to meet those needs. But we also know that 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions are currently associated with either constructing infrastructure and buildings or operating them. Power plants, buildings, transport. And those are really cruel and powerful figures. And I think it's clear that if we're going to solve this challenge of decarbonising infrastructure, we're going to need an all-in approach. We're going to need to put everything on the table to try and achieve that. The good news, I think, is that digital now does offer us quite a powerful new capability for both meeting infrastructure needs and cutting carbon. And I think, 30 to 40% step change gains are already possible when we deploy digital skills, digital insight, digital technologies to the world of infrastructure. For example, if we take the example of planning and designing cities and places, it's now possible to use cheap and abundant satellite data and the power of machine learning to understand and design solutions for cities and places in a way we never could before. We've done a piece of work recently with Shanghai, where we've designed a drainage master plan, which by using satellite data to understand at a very granular level the city, we've been able to design interventions which involve more blue interventions, more green interventions than just purely pouring concrete in the ground. As a result of that, there's an urban master plan for Shanghai that is probably 30% cheaper, uses 30% less carbon, and is a green and blue solution to developing urban infrastructures that we wouldn't have been able to do previously. Or another example would be the powerful need to reduce embedded carbon as we build infrastructure. So we're now able to use quite sophisticated design and modeling tools to model the structures for concrete and timber high-rises in a way we never could previously. Now I think the world, and including Arup, is now designing 10 or 11-story buildings that use timber in a very, very successful way. Those designs are now reducing the embedded carbon in buildings and infrastructure by a half over what would have been the case, which is a huge benefit to bring. Equally, there are opportunities, abundant opportunities, for reducing operational carbon by tackling energy and energy efficiency, just as Laura was saying. So we can use things like generative algorithms and advanced techniques to really optimize energy systems in a way we never could before. And so we can derive pathways to net zero energy in buildings and net zero carbon in buildings, which get there quicker, cheaper, and more quickly than before, and save 15 to 20 to 30% of carbon over our current infrastructure. In many ways, the best way of avoiding carbon is to get the best out of our existing assets. The lowest carbon thing is something that isn't built, but we just use more of what we've currently got. So again, there are assets all the way around the world where by beginning to use the insights from data and engineering knowledge, we can actually safely extend the lifetime of assets beyond what was currently thought. So an example we've been working on recently is offshore wind, where the design life is dependent on the complex monopiles that are hammered into the base of the sea. We've been using the power of data now to analyze the performance of those and use that to optimize the performance of offshore wind systems. We can validate that those will last, considerably longer than their design life, and we can optimize the performance of offshore wind in a way that we haven't been able to previously by using the power of data and machine learning. That generates significant savings to offshore wind operators, but it reduces carbon quite significantly too. Ultimately, of course, we can use the power of digital and data to design net zero across the whole life cycle and embed circular economy principles. And that's something that we've done most recently with something called the People's Pavilion, which was a completely circular economy building with zero net energy and carbon across the life cycle. And that included using the ability to put in place barcodes and data systems in order to accurately track and really understand the performance and the provenance of the materials that's used and the full recycling of those materials. So it's a huge challenge to meet the needs of the population and reduce carbon. But I think, and we're going to need everything on the table to do it, but I think our experience and the experience of many organizations working in this sector is that digital is providing us a new opportunity to do those things. And I think is providing us an opportunity to achieve a step change in our ability to cut carbon while at the same time building the infrastructure that we need.
Many thanks, Will. I really appreciate your perspectives on digital and how this can help us to do much more efficient design, better use of what we already have. I really appreciate the insights on that and the net zero design.